The European Union is an organization of 27 European states working together in politics and in the economy, which has four main institutions to administer itself: the Council, the Commission, the other Council, and the Parliament. The first one has 29 members, and the next two have 27. So, how many do you think the Parliament will have? 30? 40? 705. Yep, this is the only interesting one. Let's talk about it. A parliament is an institution elected by the people to be the representation of those people, because it's a little difficult to fit everyone in one nation into the same building. And you can imagine that if you're representing not one, but 27 countries, that number might just skyrocket. This is the European Parliament. I thought it was a bear. The modern elected European Parliament was created after the 1957 Treaties of Rome, although under the condition that the voting system to elect a parliament will be the same in each member state. This never happened, and they eventually caved in 1979, letting it be elected however the member states wanted to elect it, saying that the uniform voting system would be put off to a later date. Ah yes, the later date in question? Classic EU. Since then, we've had 9 European parliaments, and the 10th one will form in 2024. The 705 members of the European Parliament, or MEPs, or MEPs as I like to call them, are split up between the 27 member states, proportional to their population, with Germany having the most at 96, and Malta, Luxembourg and Cyprus having the least at 6. However, if seats were distributed entirely based on population, then those last 3 would actually have 0 seats. So in a way, it kind of works like the American electoral college system, so that the little ones don't get left behind. The MEPs aren't allowed to sit with each other based on nationality. They're supposed to show off that the parliament can be united through diversity, so instead they're seated based on ideology, just like any regular parliament would be. And just like in other regular parliaments, there are political parties as well. Or more accurately, political groups. For example, the Greens/EFA is a group comprised of 4 European political parties: the Greens, the European Free Alliance, the European Pirate Party, and Volt Europa. These parties themselves are a collection of national parties, so the Greens consist of the German Greens, the French Greens, the Finnish Greens, the Belgian Greens, and so on. So a European group is a collection of European parties, which are a collection of national parties. They're a party of parties, to put it simply. If they have at least 23 MEPs from at least 7 member states to agree on forming a group, then it's allowed. Except for in the 8th Parliament, where it was temporarily changed to 25 to prevent a far-right nationalist group from forming, even though that happened in the 9th Parliament anyways. But hey, water under the bridge. Currently there are 7 political groups, so let's draw some balls and get political. This is what you need to know about every political group in the European Parliament. I'm going to talk about the 2 biggest groups, the European People's Party group and the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats, at the same time, because they fill very similar roles in the parliament. Parties like these are known as big tents, and their basic gimmick is that they appeal to a broad range of voters, fitting a lot of voters into a tent. If you're somewhat of a social democrat, then you're gonna like the S&D, and if you're somewhat of a conservative, then you're gonna like the EPP. Their broad appeal to people who are moderately on one side is what makes them so popular. But of course, it also means that they're incredibly boring. While the EU Parliament doesn't form a complete government like national parliaments, meaning that coalitions and oppositions are necessary, these 2 parties genuinely act like the responsible parents of the rest, and work together to make sure that actually important stuff gets done. They also agree on splitting the 5-year-long presidency of the parliament equally between them, and they're able to do this because they easily get more than 50% of MEPs together. Except for the current parliament, in which they didn't, so the liberals are also included. Lately across Europe, big tent parties have been doing a terrible job at being a big tent, losing a lot of votes to liberals, greens, conservatives, and whatever creatures lurk in the radical right. Good luck, Grandpa. Every social democrat and conservative couple needs a 3rd wheel, and the liberals have proven to be perfect for the job. Okay, so like 20% of my audience is from the States, so I need to clear things up a little. When I say liberal, I mean the ones on the center right. Since liberalism is like the most left-wing that US politics ever gets, that whole ideology is considered left in US politics, which is not the case anywhere else. In Europe it's more so, keep the government as small as possible, and also I want money. The liberals have always been in a pretty comfortable 3rd place in the parliament, but their support has been dwindling, which all came to a head when they got less seats than the conservatives in the 8th Parliament. Absolutely devastating. And then in 2016, Emmanuel Macron creates the La République En Marche party and handily wins the French presidency and over 60% of seats in the French parliament in 2017. Yo, new kid on the block, huh? Yeah, I remember my first time. Say, do you wanna team up or something? Oui, bien sûr. Say, how about I join that coalition, huh? I hate this guy! And that's the story of how Renew became relevant. The Greens/EFA of course has a lot of green parties who like environmentalism and pacifism, otherwise known as the parties that force the other ones to have a climate change policy. But I'm not so interested in the Greens themselves, because the best part about the Greens/EFA is that they have the most insane group of parties imaginable. Alongside the Greens, the EFA part stands for the European Free Alliance, a collection of separatist and minority rights parties. These include parties for Corsica, Frisians, and literally every part of Spain. They even do crossovers. A funny thing about the EFA is that by far the biggest party in this group, the Flemish, actually gets a large amount of votes in comparison to the rest of the group, meaning that they have the privilege of having an ideology, meaning that they're in a conservative group instead, while staying in the EFA. Yeah, the other ones in this group are too small to fit having an ideology in their agenda. Besides the Greens and EFA, there's also Volt, whose eventual end goal is a completely federal European state. That's the opposite of what the EFA wants, but alright. And finally, Pirates! Not the seafaring ones, but those who want freedom of information, freedom of the internet, and also screw copyright. Finally, a party for us YouTubers. Together, these 4 parties form the most wild political grouping I've ever seen. I truly wonder how their sessions of Dungeons & Dragons go. The European Conservatives and Reformists is the group to join if you're more conservative than the EPP, but as racist I mean conservative than the ID. But to be honest, I'm not super knowledgeable when it comes to conservatism, so let's just take it straight from the lion's mouth. The European Conservatist and Reformist group is a center-right. Okay, you've already lost me. Well, the ECR does have something special going on. They don't describe themselves as Europhiles or Eurosceptics, but instead as Eurorealists, which is a reformed EU as a community of nations cooperating in areas where they have some common interest that can best be advanced by working together. Wait, isn't that just diplomacy? Okay, I've been pretty harsh on the ECR so far, so what are the positives? Well, they want to cut down on bureaucracy. That's good. I like it when my parliament is more so a soap opera than a bunch of men in suits coming together to do paperwork. They're also trying to pull the EPP closer to the right wing, hoping to take them away from their spouse to create a new alliance. And then there's also the fact that, well, it could be worse. Identity and Democracy is your token I don't want to be here group. They're Eurosceptic, anti-immigration, and would prefer it if the nations within the EU were more powerful than it. Don't get too attached. Unlike regular political parties, groups aren't exactly coherent. Parties join, parties leave, and sometimes groups implode entirely. This is especially the case for the Eurosceptics, because they cannot figure out what they're doing. Eurosceptic parties will always be the black sheep of the parliament, and the others tend to keep them away from actually important decisions. You see, for those who haven't heard, recently the EU has been going through a scandal known as Qatargate. The TLDR is that Qatar was chosen to host the 2022 World Cup, and while this should have been a boost for their international prestige, instead it was the exact opposite. You see, it's a little bit difficult to build stadiums in the middle of the fucking desert, so Qatar resorted to, dare I say, slave labor to build it. So in order to improve their prestige again, Qatar allegedly gave some maps a bunch of smackaroos to do some sweet talking for them in the EU Parliament. So all of the groups came together to sign a resolution condemning Qatargate, except for ID, because they weren't allowed to sign it, and they have a juicy article on their website whining about it. Get cordon sanitaire. They also struggle a lot with the cohesion of their group, because if the only thing that unites your group is being radical, then that's gonna be a real issue. Especially when the party is split on either supporting Ukraine, or actually supporting Russia in the Russo-Ukrainian war. Yikes, that's a lot of abstentions there, huh? But I guess the lack of cohesion does make sense if your political policy is to get rid of the EU and thus stop existing. But hey, at least if you're gonna burn and crash, you might have another friend by your side. So you know those results of the Ukraine vote that I just showed you? Well, so yeah, let this be a lesson to you. You are not immune to propaganda. Okay, but to be fair to the left though, the reason why a lot of them voted against the resolution is not because they condone the invasion, but rather because they don't like sending weapons, because that strengthens NATO and they hate NATO. However, does that make their vote against the resolution justified? The left, otherwise known by their funnier name, Gutengal, is a party for Eurosceptics on the opposite side of the spectrum. It's the smallest group in the current parliament with only 38 MEPs, dangerously close to the required 23 to be a group. But this is offset by them being a lot more stable than their antipode, because of the whole communism equality thing. Except for that time when the Greek Communist Party left because the left was apparently too soft. You know, the Greek Civil War Greek Communist Party, the doesn't recognize the Holodomor Greek Communist Party. Maybe it was for the better. Alright, what else do these guys do? Oh wow, guess I'm a Marxist now. Then there's the Non-inscrits. They're the parties who have been able to obtain seats in the parliament, but didn't align themselves with any political group. Now, I can go over each of them individually as to why they didn't, but if I just say that this is where the Greek Communist Party resides, then you can probably get an idea as to why these parties don't play along with the rest, even less so than ID or Gutengal. Notably, this includes the Hungarian Fidesz, Viktor Orban's little dictatorship. And this party alone constitutes 57% of Hungarian representation in the EU and 26% of the Non-inscrits. Thank you, Hungary, very cool. I guess something that the Non-inscrits have in common is that they're anti-establishment, which would make them populist? Probably not. But enough about the composition, let's talk about what they're cooking in there. This is the boring administrative stuff that every political body has to deal with, so hopefully I can explain it before I fall asleep. At least every month, the Parliament holds several committees, which only a small part of MEPs attend. There they talk about current issues on specific topics like the economy, social affairs, environment, culture, industry, foreign affairs, and so on. These committees decide what's going to be talked about during the plenaries, which are held monthly in Strasbourg and twice a month in Brussels. This is the main event where all 705 MEPs and their groups gather to discuss important stuff about any topic and also vote on resolutions like the one on Ukraine that I just talked about. Besides that, the European Parliament can amend or reject laws that the Commission creates. It approves of the annual budget together with the Council. It supervises the other EU bodies and can take them to court if they do stupid things. And it has to approve the President of the Commission. While all of this doesn't seem too impressive, they're able to fulfill their role of being the counterweight to the European Commission pretty successfully. Because despite the fact that they can't make their own laws, they can tell the Commission to do so. They can reject the Commission's President. They can even fire the whole damn Commission if enough people agree to it. But the only time they ever wanted to do so, the Commission just resigned by itself in 1999. Besides that, the Parliament also supports democracy, and human rights, and the environment, and Did somebody say Bosnia? That's like number 3 on my funniest countries tier list. Hey, thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe if you would like to see more videos like this. The next one will actually also be about the European Union and whether or not nations with a candidate status have a chance of joining. I think it would also be fun if I made a follow-up video when the 10th Parliament forms in 2024, so I guess that's something to look forward to in like a year. Anyways, that's it. See ya.